The evening was cold, and the city lights flickered across the wet streets after a light rain. People hurried into warm cafes and restaurants carrying shopping bags and laughter. Inside one such restaurant, the air was filled with the smell of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and sweet desserts. Families sat around tables, couples leaned close to each other, and friends talked loudly while waiters moved quickly between them. It was a normal night for everyone until the door opened. A young woman stepped inside. She looked out of place as if she did not belong to the brightness and warmth of the restaurant. Her clothes were worn, her coat thin, and her shoes looked like they had carried her across long, rough roads. Her hair was messy, as though the wind had been her only companion for days. She stood at the door for a moment, shivering slightly, her eyes scanning the busy room. Some customers noticed her, but most went back to their meals, assuming she was just another passerby. But she wasn't. She had come for something. Her stomach tightened with hunger and her heart pounded with fear. For a few seconds, she considered walking back out. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe she would be laughed at, humiliated. But her hunger was stronger than her fear. She stepped forward, moving toward a waiter who was balancing a tray of glasses. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the noise of the restaurant. "Excuse me," she said, hesitating. The waiter looked at her quickly, already judging her tired clothes and weary face. Can I play your piano?" "Just for a meal." The words hung in the air like an unexpected silence. A few people nearby heard her and their conversations paused. Someone chuckled, another whispered to his friend. The waiter blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. He glanced at the far side of the restaurant where an old upright piano sat against the wall. The piano was mostly decoration. Nobody really played it anymore. The girl noticed his doubt and her cheeks turned red. She felt dozens of invisible eyes pressing against her, waiting to see what would happen next. In her chest, her heart thumped painfully. She knew how this looked. A tired, hungry stranger asking to touch an instrument most people respected only from afar. To them, it must have sounded like a joke. The waiter frowned, shifting uncomfortably. He had no authority to agree, so he gestured toward the owner, a heavy-set man standing behind the counter. The owner had seen the girl enter, and now he raised his eyebrows in irritation. Business was good tonight. The last thing he wanted was some kind of performance that might disturb his paying customers. He crossed his arms and gave her a sharp look as if to say, "What nonsense is this?" But the girl didn't look away. Her hunger gave her courage, and her eyes met his with quiet determination. "Please," she repeated softly, her voice steadier this time. "I don't want money. Just a meal." The room began to stir. A group of young men at one table laughed openly now. One of them whispered loudly, "She wants to play piano." "Dressed like that." Another shook his head and grinned. "Maybe she thinks she's a star." A woman at a nearby table smirked and rolled her eyes. The whispers grew like a tide, small ripples of laughter spreading across the restaurant. The girl heard every sound. Each giggle was like a stone thrown at her chest. She wanted to run, to escape the heat of their judgment, but her empty stomach anchored her feet to the ground. She had one chance to show them she was serious. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed them together, almost in prayer. Her voice was quiet but carried through the sudden hush between bursts of laughter. "I can play," she said. "I promise. Just one song." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The owner tapped his fingers on the counter, his jaw tight. Customers leaned closer, curious now. Some waited for the owner to throw her out. Others waited for more entertainment in the form of her embarrassment. The young woman stood small and fragile in the middle of the glowing restaurant, her request hanging in the air like a fragile thread. That was the moment, the line between despair and hope. She didn't know if they would let her. She didn't know if she would leave with a full stomach or with only the sting of humiliation. But she knew one thing. She had to try. And as she stood there under the weight of their eyes, she whispered again in her heart the same plea she had spoken aloud. "Can I play? Just for a meal?" The sound of laughter grew louder, spreading from one table to another like fire catching dry leaves. People turned in their chairs to get a better look at the girl who had dared to ask such a strange question. To them, she was nothing more than a hungry stranger in shabby clothes. Some thought she was joking. Others thought she was just desperate, and a few believed she was completely out of her mind. At one table, a group of young men leaned back in their chairs, smirking. One of them clapped his hands slowly and said, "Go on, play us a song, little beggar." Maybe we'll give you some crumbs." His friends burst into laughter, their voices echoing through the restaurant. The girl's cheeks burned red, but she kept her eyes lowered, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of seeing her pain. Nearby, a woman wearing expensive jewelry shook her head in disgust. She whispered to her husband, "How dare she? A place like this is not for people like her. What if she ruins the evening?" The husband nodded without looking at the girl, too busy cutting his steak. To them she was invisible, a shadow that had wandered in from the cold. The waiter, still holding his tray, looked uncomfortable. He didn't want to get in trouble with the owner, but he also felt a strange sympathy for the girl. Yet fear of being scolded was stronger than kindness. He sighed and muttered under his breath, "You should leave before you make a bigger scene." But she didn't move. She stood tall even though her body trembled. In the corner, an old man with gray hair and kind eyes watched the scene unfold. He had been quietly sipping his soup when the girl first spoke. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh. Instead, his eyes softened. He had seen enough of life to recognize hunger. Not only the kind that gnawed at the stomach, but also the kind that ached inside the soul. He leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin, and decided to wait before saying anything. The restaurant owner, standing at the counter, was growing impatient. He hated disturbances, and this girl was becoming one. His business depended on satisfied customers, not on charity. He stepped forward, his heavy shoes thudding against the wooden floor, and the noise of the room slowly quieted as people waited for his decision. He glared at the girl. "You think this is a stage?" he asked, his voice sharp. "This is a restaurant. People come here to eat, not to watch strangers touch my piano." The girl swallowed hard. Her lips trembled, but her voice came out steady enough. "Please," she said again. "Just one song. If it's bad, I'll leave. If it's good, maybe you can give me a plate of food." Some people snorted, finding her words amusing. One man near the window said loudly, "Bad? It'll be terrible. She's probably never touched a piano before." Another chimed in, "She'll break it with those dirty hands." Laughter followed again, cruel and sharp. But the girl didn't step back. Each cruel word pierced her heart, but she held on to one thing: she could play. She knew the piano like it was part of her body, like an extension of her own breath. Music was her only treasure, the one thing life had not managed to steal from her. The old man in the corner finally cleared his throat. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough weight to hush a few people nearby. "Let her try," he said calmly. Heads turned toward him. Some frowned, annoyed that he was encouraging her. Others shrugged, curious to see what would happen. "It's just one song," he added, lifting his spoon again as if it was the simplest thing in the world. The owner hesitated. He didn't like the idea, but now everyone's eyes were on him. If he threw her out, some might say he was cruel. If he allowed her, at least the customers might have a moment of entertainment before she embarrassed herself. He sighed loudly, making sure everyone saw his irritation, and waved his hand. "Fine, but if you mess up, you leave immediately. And don't you dare damage my piano." The girl nodded quickly, her eyes brightening just a little. Relief and nervousness flooded her at the same time. She whispered, "Thank you," though she doubted he even cared to hear it. She walked toward the piano, each step echoing in her ears like a drumbeat. Behind her, the laughter quieted, replaced by whispers. Some people leaned forward, waiting for the show. They expected wrong notes, clumsy fingers, and more reason to laugh. A few prepared their mocking words, ready to throw them like stones when she failed. But inside the girl, a small flame of determination burned. She had faced laughter before, she had faced rejection, but music had never betrayed her. As she reached the piano, her hands trembled, not from fear of failure, but from the weight of the moment. She brushed her fingers over the worn keys, feeling their cool surface. She knew what she was about to do would either feed her for one night, or mark her with shame forever in the eyes of these strangers. The restaurant fell into an uneasy silence. Forks paused halfway to mouths, glasses rested on tables, and all eyes turned toward the girl sitting at the old piano. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, but her fingers were ready. And though the laughter still lingered in the air, something else now hovered above it: curiosity. The girl sat down in front of the old upright piano, her body small against the heavy wooden frame. The chair creaked under her as if even it was uncertain whether she belonged there. The restaurant was strangely quiet now, Only the clinking of a spoon against a plate or the low hiss of steam from the kitchen filled the silence. Dozens of eyes were on her, some filled with mockery, others with curiosity, and a very few with quiet hope. The owner stood nearby, arms crossed, his face hard and doubtful. He had allowed her, but only because the old man in the corner had spoken. Still, he expected failure. To him, she looked like someone who had never touched fine things in her life, let alone an instrument like this. He muttered under his breath, "One mistake and she's out." The girl breathed slowly, trying to calm the storm inside her chest. Her stomach was empty. Her hands were trembling, but her spirit would not let her give up. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined the only place where she ever felt safe, sitting at her grandmother's piano many years ago, her small hands learning the keys one by one. The memory gave her strength. When she opened her eyes, the crowd was waiting. The young men who had laughed earlier leaned back in their chairs, grins on their faces. One of them whispered to his friend, "This is going to be fun. She'll hit 2 wrong keys and cry." A woman near the bar raised her eyebrows and smirked, clearly ready to be entertained by failure. The girl lifted her hands slowly, almost ceremoniously, until her fingers hovered just above the black and white keys. For a moment she didn't move. The air grew heavy, the silence thick. People leaned forward. Some were impatient already, ready to boo her off. The owner tapped his foot against the floor, his arms tightening across his chest. Then finally she pressed one key, just a single note. It was soft, pure, and unexpectedly beautiful. The sound seemed to cut through the noise of the world outside, through the doubt in the room, and linger in the air like a whisper. Some people blinked, surprised. Others laughed nervously, thinking it was luck. But then she pressed another key and another, and the notes began to flow together like drops of water forming a stream. The melody was still quiet, like the soft footsteps of someone walking carefully in the dark, but it was steady, confident. The young men stopped laughing. Their grins faded into uncertain smirks. A woman lowered her glass, suddenly paying more attention. The old man in the corner smiled faintly, as if he had expected this. Still, many in the room doubted her. They thought she would stumble any second. They leaned closer, waiting for the mistake that would prove them right. The owner shifted uncomfortably, annoyed at the strange tension now holding the room. The girl felt their eyes, their doubts, but she didn't let them inside her. She kept her focus on the piano. With each note, her body grew steadier, her fingers less shaky. The music began to grow, moving beyond the cautious steps of the beginning and rising into something fuller. It was as if she was speaking not with words, but with sound, telling the story of her hunger, her struggles, her long walk in the cold, and her quiet strength. She had promised just one song, but even within these first few moments, she had already given them more than they expected. The notes rose gently, wrapping around the listeners, making them hold their breath. Conversations died completely. Even the waiters in the middle of carrying plates stopped and turned their heads. One man at the back muttered softly, She can play?" His voice was not mocking this time, but surprised, almost ashamed. A woman near the front leaned on her elbows, her eyes wide, her earlier judgment forgotten. The girl's eyes remained closed as her fingers moved. She didn't need to see the keys. They were part of her. She had played in train stations and empty churches in her dreams when she had no piano at all. The instrument was her only friend when the world had turned cold. And now, for a single meal, she would give this room everything she had. The first part of her melody ended with a soft pause. The silence that followed was so deep it felt like the whole room was holding its breath. Then she began again, this time stronger. Her hands moved faster, weaving sounds that no one in that restaurant had expected. The mocking smiles were gone now. In their place was something else, attention, respect, even awe. People who had laughed were now leaning forward, eyes fixed on her, afraid to miss a single note. The owner, still standing with his arms crossed, felt a strange tightening in his chest. He didn't want to admit it, but even he could feel the beauty in her playing. The girl, though still hungry, felt her spirit rising. For the first time that night, she wasn't thinking of the empty pit in her stomach or the cruel whispers behind her. She was lost in the music, and through it she was free. As the melody grew and stretched, the restaurant transformed. It was no longer just a place of food and chatter. It became a stage, and she, the hungry stranger, was the performer everyone had unknowingly been waiting for. And though they had laughed at her minutes before, now they were silent. captured by the first notes of a genius they had almost turned away. The restaurant was completely silent now. Not a single spoon moved, no glass clinked, no one whispered. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the girl at the piano. Just a little while ago they had laughed at her. They thought she was a joke, a poor hungry girl looking for a free meal. But now something had changed. The sound she created was not the sound of a beginner or a street player. It was something deep, powerful, and full of life. Her fingers danced across the keys, fast and light, as if they had wings. Each note was perfect, falling in the right place, touching something inside every person in the room. The music wasn't loud, but it was full. It was like watching a quiet river turn into a strong, flowing stream. You couldn't stop it. You didn't want to. The melody told a story, though no words were spoken. The notes were like memories turned into sound. There was sadness like an old pain that had been carried too long. There was hope, soft and shining like sunlight breaking through clouds. There was strength, hidden deep under the gentle surface, showing in the way her fingers moved with more force now. One man, sitting at a table near the piano, found his eyes wet with tears. He blinked quickly and looked away, embarrassed. He didn't even know why he felt that way. It wasn't just music. It felt like the girl was speaking directly to him, telling him something he had forgotten long ago. Across the room, the group of young men who had laughed earlier were no longer smiling. Their faces were serious now. One of them leaned forward, his arms resting on the table. She's amazing, he whispered. His friends nodded silently. Even the waiters had stopped. Plates stayed in their hands, untouched. One waitress held a tray with drinks frozen in place, her eyes wide. She had never seen anything like this before. Not on a stage, not in a concert, nothing this real. The owner of the restaurant stood behind the counter, still watching. His arms had slowly dropped to his sides. He looked at the girl like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Just minutes ago he had wanted to throw her out. Now he wasn't sure what to think. But he couldn't look away. The girl's face was calm. Her eyes were still closed. She wasn't playing for them, she was playing for herself. For the hunger that had followed her for days. For the cold nights when she had no bed. For the memories of her grandmother teaching her how to press each key with feeling, not just technique. She didn't hear the silence of the room. She didn't see their shocked faces. She was in her own world now. A world built from sound, from emotion, from everything she had lost and everything she still hoped to find. The music changed again. It became faster, more intense. The notes came like rain, soft at first, then strong like a storm of feeling. The keys clicked beneath her hands, but her fingers never missed. Not once. Every sound had a purpose. Every moment meant something. Some people began to smile, not because they were amused, but because they were amazed. A young woman near the window leaned forward and placed her hand on her heart. She had once taken piano lessons years ago and had given up, but listening to this girl she suddenly felt something return, a dream she thought was gone. The old man in the corner, the one who had spoken up for her, nodded slowly. His eyes sparkled as he whispered, "I knew it." He didn't say more. He just listened as if the music was healing something inside him. The song reached a peak. Her fingers moved so fast now that they were almost a blur, but still each note was clear, like stars in the night sky. The room held its breath. People forgot where they were, forgot their food, forgot their problems. For those few minutes, the only thing that existed was the sound flowing from the piano. And then, she slowed. The notes softened. Her hands moved more gently now, like she was saying goodbye to someone she loved. The storm of music calmed, returning to a quiet, peaceful melody. Finally, the last note played. It rang out soft and sweet like the last word in a beautiful story. And then, nothing. Else, the girl opened her eyes slowly. She looked down at her hands, breathing softly. Her heart was still racing. She didn't dare look at the crowd. She didn't know what they would say. She had played her heart out, but she was still the hungry girl in torn clothes. But what she didn't know was this. No one was laughing anymore. No one even moved. They were still lost in the world she had just created with music. And in that silence there was something powerful, not pity, not shame. The last note still hung in the air, soft and beautiful like a falling feather. The girl sat still at the piano, her hands resting gently on the keys. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't even look up. It was as if she was afraid the moment would disappear if she breathed too loud. Her heart beat hard inside her chest, not from fear, but from everything she had just poured into the music. She had given it her whole soul. The restaurant was silent. Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. Nobody even touched their food. The only sound was the quiet hum of the kitchen behind the door, where even the cooks had paused, wondering what had just happened outside. Then slowly, a chair creaked. Someone stood up. It was the old man in the corner. He picked up his cane, stepped forward, and started to clap. Just once, then again, slow, steady claps that echoed in the quiet room. His eyes were filled with something strong, something between pride and wonder. His hands clapped not for entertainment, but for something deeper. Something true. A few more people joined in. One woman wiped her eyes and began to clap too. Then another. And another. The sound of hands coming together filled the space, growing louder with every second. People stood up from their tables. Some smiled. Some looked surprised. Some looked ashamed of their earlier laughter. But all of them clapped. The girl looked up, shocked. Her eyes searched the crowd like she was dreaming. Was this real? She had expected silence. Or maybe another insult. But not this. Never this. For a moment she just sat there. Her lips slightly parted, unsure of what to do. A young man from the back of the room whispered to his friend. "She's incredible," the friend nodded. "She's not just good, she's something else." The woman who had earlier rolled her eyes now clapped with red cheeks, embarrassed by her earlier thoughts. The group of young men who had made jokes were now completely silent, clapping slowly, unable to look each other in the eyes. The owner stood behind the counter, arms at his sides. His mouth was slightly open, but no words came out. He stared at the girl like he had never seen her before, like she had transformed into someone else in front of him. But the truth was, she had always been this person. He just hadn't seen it. None of them had. She finally stood up, her legs shaking slightly. Her fingers still tingled from the last note. She stepped away from the piano and gave a small, shy bow. Not the bow of a proud performer, but the bow of someone who was still unsure if she belonged in the place where applause lived. A waiter walked toward her, his eyes wide. I've never heard anything like that," he said, almost breathless. "You're not just good, you're a genius." The girl didn't know what to say. No one had called her that before. She didn't even believe it herself. She just knew how to play. It was the only thing she had left in the world. The piano had never judged her. It never cared how she looked or how much money she had. It only listened. And now, for the first time, people had listened too. A woman stood up and asked, "What's your name?" The girl hesitated. Her voice came out soft. "Elena," the woman nodded. "Elena, you made me cry tonight." "Thank you." Another man raised his hand. "Can you play one more, please?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. Not because of the request, but because she could see now. They meant it. It wasn't pity. It wasn't just about giving her a meal. They had truly been touched. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. The owner walked slowly toward her, his face still unreadable. He stopped a few feet away and looked her up and down. Then, to everyone's surprise, he said, "You can eat here. As much as you want. And not just tonight." He paused. "Play here again and your meals are on me." Gasps came from the crowd. Some clapped again. Others nodded in approval. Elena was too stunned to speak. She simply nodded, her lips trembling with emotion. She sat back down, gently placed her fingers on the keys again and played. Not for a meal now, but because she wanted to. Because the music inside her finally had a place to live. That night, the restaurant was no longer just a place to eat. It became a place of magic, of music, of human hearts opening. People stayed longer than usual. They talked softer. They smiled more. And in the middle of it all was a girl who had come in with nothing, just a hunger and a song, and who left a room full of strangers completely changed. And though most of them would return to their normal lives, they would remember this night for a very long time. The night they saw a genius hidden in plain sight. The night they almost missed her, until she played. Elena's fingers moved over the piano keys again, but this time it felt different. The fear was gone. She was no longer just playing for a meal. She was playing because she wanted to. Because something inside her had been waiting for this moment for a long, long time. The music flowed more freely now, soft, calm, and full of emotion. Each note seemed to float through the restaurant like a warm breeze after a storm. People didn't go back to eating. They didn't turn away or pick up their phones. They stayed still, eyes on her, listening with open hearts. Even the children, who usually ran between tables or asked for dessert, were quiet, sitting beside their parents with wide eyes. The restaurant, once noisy and full of laughter and voices, had become something else. It felt like a small concert hall. The lights seemed softer. The walls seemed to listen too. It was as if the building itself had changed because of her music. A couple sitting near the front reached across the table and held hands. They didn't speak, but the song seemed to remind them of something important, something they had forgotten in the rush of everyday life. A young woman took out a napkin and quietly wiped her eyes. She remembered the piano lessons she had quit years ago because life got too busy. Now watching Elena, she wished she had never stopped. There was still music inside her too. She just hadn't let it out. A man in a suit who had come in only to grab a quick dinner between meetings leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. His phone buzzed on the table beside him, but he didn't look at it. For the first time in weeks, he felt peace. The old man who had spoken for Elena sat quietly, his cane resting beside his chair. He didn't need to say anything now. His eyes sparkled with quiet joy. He had seen many years pass, many people come and go, but moments like this, true, rare moments of beauty, were hard to find. He felt lucky to be here. The owner stood behind the counter watching the room. He didn't understand music in a deep way, but he understood people, and what he saw in their faces told him that this girl had done something incredible. She had changed the energy of the entire place. It was no longer just his restaurant. Tonight it belonged to her. Elena's song reached its gentle end. The final note rang out like a whisper and then faded into silence. The room held its breath once more. Then came the applause, not wild or noisy, but warm and honest. A true thank you. She looked around slowly, still surprised. These were the same people who had laughed at her. Now their eyes were full of something else. Respect, gratitude, even admiration. As she stood, people started to talk, not loudly but kindly. That was beautiful, someone said. Where did you learn to play like that? Asked another. Do you come here often? Will you play again? Someone else added with hope in their voice. Elena gave small smiles and nodded shyly. Her voice was soft. I used to play at home. A long time ago. My grandmother taught me. A young man from the laughing group stepped forward, his face red with shame. I'm sorry, he said quietly. We were wrong. You're amazing. Elena looked at him surprised, but gave a gentle nod. It's okay, she said. Then something even more surprising happened. A woman stood up and said, I want to help her. Can I buy her a warm coat? Another said, she can stay at my sister's shelter, it's clean and safe. A third added, I know someone from the music school downtown. Maybe they could help her. It wasn't just about the music anymore. People were reaching out, wanting to help, wanting to give her more than just applause. They wanted to give her a chance. Elena didn't know what to say. Her eyes filled with tears. She had come in for just one meal, one warm plate of food, but now she had found something she hadn't expected. Kindness. She looked around at the faces, some smiling, some tearful, some still quiet with emotion, and she felt something warm grow inside her. Maybe the world wasn't as cold as she had believed. Maybe people just needed to listen before they could understand. The owner walked over again and placed a hand on her shoulder. Come back tomorrow, he said. We'll keep the piano ready for you. She nodded slowly, her voice caught in her throat. Thank you, she whispered. That night, Elena didn't sleep in the cold. She didn't go hungry. She was taken to a small shelter run by a kind woman who had been moved by her music. The bed was simple, but it was warm. The pillow was soft. And as she lay down, her heart still full from the evening, she smiled for the first time in weeks. The music she had played didn't just feed her body. It opened doors. It changed hearts. It reminded people of the good still left in the world, and most of all, it reminded Elena of who she truly was. Not just a girl looking for a meal, but someone with a gift. A gift the world had almost missed. The restaurant owner sat alone in his office that night, long after the last customer had left. The chairs were stacked, the lights dimmed, and the soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. He had run this restaurant for 15 years. He had seen all kinds of people. Happy families, rude guests, lonely souls, even troublemakers. But never in all that time had anyone changed the feeling of the place the way that girl had done. Elena. He leaned back in his chair, thinking about her. At first, she had just looked like someone trying to get something for free. He had seen people fake stories before, some asking for food, others begging for help, and many of them just playing games. So when she said, "Can I play for just a meal?" he was sure it was another trick. He had almost told her to leave right away, and then she played. Her music still echoed in his mind. The way she touched the keys, like she was speaking through them. He didn't know much about music, but he didn't need to. He had seen how people changed while listening to her. He had seen laughter turn into silence.
He had seen eyes fill with tears.
He had seen strangers feel something together, something powerful. She didn't just play the piano. She played their hearts. He rubbed his chin slowly, then looked at the piano through the small window in his door. It sat there now, quiet again. But it didn't look the same anymore. For years it had been nothing more than decoration. A few kids had banged on it. Some guests had played silly songs after a glass of wine. But tonight that piano had come alive, and it had been waiting for her. He remembered the moment she finished playing. How everyone stood up. How they clapped. How they looked at her not with pity but with awe. And then the moment that touched him most. When she bowed, just a small bow, shy and unsure, like she still didn't believe what had happened. He felt a strange pain in his chest. Guilt, maybe, or regret. He had almost thrown her out. He had almost let her walk away into the cold, hungry, and alone. All because he judged her too quickly. Because she didn't look like someone worth listening to. He stood up and walked slowly back into the dining area. The place looked empty, but in his mind he could still see the faces of the crowd. He could still hear the music. The room had felt different, warmer, softer, kinder. Like her music had cleaned the air. He walked over to the piano and placed a hand on it. The wood felt cold, but something inside him felt warm. He thought about what she had said. "My grandmother taught me, that was all. Just a few words. No long story, no begging. She didn't ask for sympathy. She only asked for a chance. And he had almost said no." He sat on the piano bench and stared at the keys. He didn't play. He never had. But now he wished he could. He wanted to understand what she felt when her fingers moved. How she turned pain into beauty. He sighed deeply. People had offered to help her. A coat, a place to sleep, maybe even a connection to a music school. That made him feel better. She deserved more than just one good night. But he also knew the world wasn't always kind. Help didn't always last. Promises were often broken. People meant well, but they forgot quickly. That's when he made a decision he would not forget. The restaurant had music now, real music. And it came from her, so he would make sure she always had a place to play, a warm meal, a seat to rest. No more nights in the cold, not if he could help it. The next morning he put up a small sign near the entrance. Live music by Elena, every evening at 7 p.m. People noticed it right away. Regulars smiled and said they would return. Some even brought friends. Word spread quickly. Not just about the music, but about the story behind it. The girl who had asked for a meal and left behind a memory. That evening, Elena came back. She wore a new coat given to her by one of the guests. Her hair was still messy, but her face looked different, more rested, a little brighter. When she entered, the owner walked up to her not with suspicion but with a warm smile. "Your piano is ready," he said. She smiled back, unsure what to say, but in her heart something bloomed. Someone believed in her. Someone saw her not as a burden but as a gift. She sat down again. The same piano. The same bench. But this time it felt like hers. And as her fingers began to move over the keys once more, the room filled with silence. And then with sound, rich and full of life. Just like the night before, everyone stopped to listen, but now they didn't see a stranger. They saw Elena, the girl who had once asked for just a meal, and gave them something far greater in return. The restaurant was full again that evening. The soft sound of chairs sliding, spoons clinking against plates, and light conversations filled the room. But there was something more in the air now, something you couldn't see, only feel. People had come not just to eat, but to listen. They were waiting for her, Elena. She walked in slowly, wearing the same coat someone had gifted her the night before. It was still a little big, but it was warm. Her steps were quiet and her eyes searched the room nervously, but when she saw the piano, her piano now, she took a deep breath. It felt like home. This time there were no whispers, no laughter, no mocking smiles. Instead, people nodded to her, some even smiled warmly. They had come back because of her, because of the music that had touched them so deeply. A few had even brought flowers. One little girl ran up to her and gave her a drawing. Elena sitting at the piano with music notes floating around her. Elena knelt down, took the picture with a tearful smile and whispered, "Thank you." The restaurant owner walked up beside her. "You ready?" he asked gently. She nodded. He led her to the piano and everyone watched as she sat down. The noise in the room slowly faded. Forks were set down. Conversations paused. People turned their chairs toward her, waiting for the first note. She rested her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. Just for a moment. In that second, memories came back. Cold nights on the street, the hunger that wouldn't leave, the shame of being ignored. But then she remembered the sound of clapping hands, the kind smiles, the feeling of being heard, the warmth that had returned to her life. And then she began to play. This song was different from the last, softer, slower. It didn't shout or cry. It whispered. It told a new story, not one of struggle but of healing, a song of second chances, quiet strength, and gentle beginnings. It felt like morning sunlight after a long, dark night. People listened closely. Some closed their eyes. Others held hands or wiped silent tears from their cheeks. One man leaned forward, his heart aching in a way he didn't expect. A woman held her daughter close and thought about the beauty of kindness. Even the busy waiters moved quietly, so the music wouldn't be disturbed. As the song continued, something magical happened. People began to feel connected, not just to the music but to each other. Strangers exchanged smiles. Someone paid for another's meal without saying a word. The restaurant was more than a place to eat now. It had become a place of feeling. Elena finished the last note slowly, letting it fade into the warm silence. When she lifted her hands, she didn't look up right away. She was afraid the moment might disappear. But then a soft sound filled the room, clapping. Soft at first, then louder, stronger. Not just hands hitting hands, but hearts speaking. She looked up and saw every face turned toward her. People standing, applauding with real emotion. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She had given them something rare, something they hadn't expected. A moment of truth in a noisy world. The owner walked over to her again, smiling in a way he hadn't before. It wasn't just a business smile. It was full of pride. "Elena," he said, "you've brought something to this place we didn't know we were missing." She stood, eyes shining. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the chance." The old man from the first night came forward with a small box. Inside was a simple gold pin shaped like a musical note. "You remind us all," he said, "that talent can wear any face and beauty can come from anywhere." Elena took the pin carefully, holding it as if it were made of glass. She placed it in her coat pocket near her heart. More people came up after. Some wanted to thank her, others just to shake her hand. One young woman asked for lessons. A music teacher from a nearby school gave her his card. "Come by tomorrow," he said. "We'd be honored to have you." That night, Elena didn't walk into the cold. She walked into her future. A future that was still uncertain, still full of hard days, but not alone anymore. She had found something priceless. Not just food or shelter, but a voice, a place, a beginning. As she left the restaurant after her performance, the stars shined brightly above the quiet streets. She walked slowly, holding the music inside her like a soft light. The city didn't feel so cold now. It felt open, like maybe it was finally ready to listen. And though she had once asked, "Can I play for just a meal?" Now she had played for something more. She had played for hope. She had played for change, and the world had listened.